Today, we're going to be taking a look at this mystery ham radio antenna that I picked up at a ham fest recently. Now, the reason I say it's a mystery is because I don't know what band it's for. Now, I suspect it's either 2 meters or 6 meters, something along those lines, judging by the size of it, but I don't know for sure. And it is, of course, some sort of multi-element antenna, probably a Yagi, maybe a 2 or 3 element. Now, I can tell you this, that the price on it was right. You can see it was originally listed for 10 bucks. I got it at the end of the day when the seller had marked it down to 5, just because he didn't want to take it home. Anyway, let's get this thing untied and spread out and see if we can figure out what it is. Okay, what do we got here? This turned out to be a 3-element Yagi. The boom is kind of split in 2 pieces, and you could probably see here that this is set up for horizontal polarization, meaning the mast would go through here, this bracket, perpendicular to the elements. But because both of these ends can be removed independently, you could spin them both and make this vertically polarized as well if you wanted to. Now, the one thing that's a little puzzling to me right now is that the element length is kind of weird. When I measure this out, the driven element right now is about 35 inches or so. Now, if this were a 2-meter antenna, I would expect that to be somewhere around 19 inches. And if it were 6 meters, I would expect it to be somewhere around 56 inches or so. But it's 35, so I don't know. Maybe this is not a ham radio antenna. Maybe it's some kind of commercial band thing. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Take a look at this. The ends of these elements are actually collapsed inside of themselves and can be extended and brought out. Now, there's no clamp on here to kind of hold it together, so it's kind of easy to push it back together. I guess if I'm going to use this antenna, I may want to put a clamp on it. But now that it extends out, let's see how long it is. Okay, mystery solved. When I measure this out, we're looking at about 57 inches. So this is a 6-meter antenna. I guess I'll get these elements fully extended and tighten everything up, and we'll take a closer look at it. All right, so there it is. It's a 6-meter, 3-element Yagi. The reflector is up there on the top. Each element's about 56.5, 57 inches long. Down here is the driven element. I think this is around 54 inches on either side. And the director down here at the bottom is about 52 inches or so each element. Let's take a closer look at the antenna before I set it up and try it out. We'll start with the SO239 connector. This is obviously where the coax is going to connect in. The center conductor of the coax connects through to the back side of the bracketry here. There is sort of some kind of plastic or epoxy here that insulates everything. And then this connects over to the tuning stub, which is isolated from the rest of the bracketry with this thick Bakelite insulator. Now, if I pan the camera down the tuning stub, you can see over here on this end, there is sort of a capacitive element. It looks like there is some more of that black plastic or epoxy here that the tuning stub goes into. And then the body of this connects via a clamp to the main part of the driven element. Now, I believe to adjust the tuning of the antenna, I can loosen this clamp and kind of slide it back and forth. Although there's not a lot of room here. This thing is maybe about 3 inches long or so. So any adjustments here are going to be pretty small. So here's a closer look at the telescoping elements. Now, compacted all the way down, you can see that you can almost not even tell that this is an extendable element. That's why I missed it at first. But anyway, it pulls out and just kind of locks into place with a friction fit. There are sort of 2 grooves swaged in here, and I don't know if there's tabs or something on the inside of the element that kind of lock into that, or if that's just creased because of the swage, but either way, I just kind of pull this out and it sits there by friction. Now, over time, I don't know if this thing would kind of work its way loose and collapse in the wind or something like that. So if I do end up putting this thing up permanently, I think a small clamp on the end here would probably be prudent. So here's a look at that center section of the boom I was talking about earlier. You can see that it's about 6 or 8 inches long. There's a clamp at either side, and the mast mounts sort of in the middle of here. Now the reason this is kind of cool is because if you wanted to change the polarization of the antenna, you could just loosen these clamps and then spin the ends of the boom around 90 degrees and you wouldn't have to take this thing off your mast. So I looked this antenna over closely to see if I could see anything on here that would indicate to me who made it. Now the only names that I see on here are Sherman stamped on the clamp, but I assume that's the company that manufactured the clamp. Now there's also Amphenol stamped on the connector, and of course they're known for making connectors. I'm almost positive they didn't manufacture this whole antenna. Another thing that's interesting though is this antenna is probably fairly old, and we can see that because of the use of Bakelite insulators in the connector and here on the matching stub, and also the fact that all of the hardware on this antenna is flathead screws and wing nuts. Nowadays, you would most likely see Phillips head or some other type of arrangement other than flathead. I've got the antenna set up on a 10-foot test pole. My coax is connected up and running over to a table where my VNA is set up. So let's go take a look at what the Nano VNA thinks of this antenna the way it's set up now. So first off, I want to apologize for the wicked glare on this screen. It's going to be a little hard to see, I think. But I've got this Nano VNA set up so it's sweeping between 40 and 60 megahertz. And you can see the SWR curve is shown right here. You can see that its best SWR is right around 52.8 megahertz. So up in the FM portion of the band. So as it sits, this antenna would work pretty good for the 6-meter repeaters. Now if I scroll up over here to the bottom of the band where the sideband and CW portion is, between 50 and 50.2, you can see the SWR is a little high, 2.5, 2.6 or so. Now interestingly enough, there is also an SWR dip right over here around 41.6 megahertz or so, and that's down to about 1.6 there as well. Based on what we saw in the Nano VNA, the antenna is working pretty good in the repeater portion of the 6-meter band. So I've got my Yaesu FT891 set up behind me. I've got a bunch of repeaters in the area programmed in. Let's see how many of them we can hit. This first repeater is in Tolland, Connecticut, and is the closest one to my location. I don't think we'll have any trouble keying this one up. N1 NUG testing. This next repeater has 3 remote receivers with 1 transmitter in Pelham, Massachusetts. The receiver that I'm going into is in Warren, Massachusetts, so this one is fairly close as well. N1 NUG testing. This next repeater is on top of Mount Wachusett in central Massachusetts. It's a little ways away, but we should probably be able to key it up. N1 NUG testing. So the signal was a little lower than I expected, but I may not have the antenna pointed in exactly the right direction. Either way, we were able to key it up. This next repeater is in Framingham, Massachusetts. I'd say this is about 65 or 70 miles east of me. Let's see what we can do with this one. N1 NUG testing. So this one I wasn't able to key up, but I am going to adjust the antenna position and see if that makes a difference. N1 NUG testing. Okay, no go on the Framingham. The next repeater we'll try is located on Mount Greylock in northwestern Massachusetts. This one's about 70 or 80 miles to my northwest. I'm going to spin the antenna in that direction so we've got a chance at keying this one up. N1 NUG testing. We were able to key that one up, no problem. Signal was a little low, but again, I don't know if the antenna is pointed exactly the right way. And next up, we're back at the Pelham, Massachusetts repeater with a receiver in Granville, Massachusetts, which is actually to my northwest. N1 NUG testing. And now we've got the other receiver from the Pelham repeater, which is in Greenfield, Massachusetts, which is pretty much due north of me. N1 NUG testing. So the next batch of repeaters that I have are all in Connecticut. So I'm going to spin the antenna around and face it more to my south and west because that's the direction most of those repeaters are located in. Now I've also got a hill to my south and west which kind of blocks VHF signals. So I'm not sure how successful we'll be with these Connecticut repeaters, but we'll give them a try anyway. So this repeater is in Bristol, Connecticut. N1 NUG testing. And nothing on Bristol. This next one is in East Hartland, Connecticut. N1 NUG testing. I think we were able to key that one up a little bit. I didn't hear it real well, but I may not have the antenna pointed just right. So I'm going to try aiming it a little differently, and we'll see what we can get. N1 NUG testing. So that one worked out a little better once I pointed it a little further south. The next one is sort of to my southeast in Montville, Connecticut. I think we've got a better chance at hitting this one because there aren't any hills in that direction. N1 NUG testing. Okay, so Montville looked pretty good. The next one I've got is in Vernon, Connecticut, which is very close, so I don't think we'll have any trouble hitting this one. N1 NUG testing. And as expected, the Vernon repeater looked good. Now what I want to do now is see if I can tune the antenna to get the SWR better in the sideband portion of the 6-meter band, since that's really where I operate most of the time. As we've already looked at, there's really no other way to adjust this gamma match other than to loosen this clamp and slide it back and forth. So I'm going to do just that and see if it affects the SWR at all. As you can see, I've slid that over about as far as I can. Let's hook up the Nano VNA and see if it changed anything. So after that adjustment, it doesn't seem like things changed all that much. We're now at 52.8 with a SWR of about 1.7, and you can see the curve looks very similar to the way that it did before. So unless I find a way to lengthen those elements, I think I've got to live with the antenna the way that it is and maybe dedicate it for 6-meter FM use. For $5, I can't complain. We've got a functioning 6-meter antenna, at least for the FM portion of the band. Now, if I were to put it a little higher up, say where my M2 5-element 6-meter antenna is, it would probably perform a lot better. But I think this initial test shows that the antenna is usable. However, I would like to be able to tune it for the sideband portion of the band. I'm not really sure how to do that without adding length to the elements. And honestly, I'm not exactly sure how to add length to the elements without replacing them. If you have any ideas, let me know down in the comments. But for now, I'm going to say 7-3. I hope you enjoyed the video, and thanks for watching. What do you guys want? Yeah, you want to be in the video? Oh, you're camera shy? You don't want to be in the video? You do though, huh? You want to come over and check out this antenna. That's what you want to do.